Hello everyone, my name is Marina. I'm a PhD student at the project Imperiale Aitiologie. This is a project based here in Free University Berlin, but I'm doing my PhD in Erlangen-Nuremberg University in the field of political theory. So I'm a political theorist from a background, so I will talk a lot about ideas and concepts and not very practical things, but mostly about books and the knowledge production system. And I already got the question, what is ideology? This is actually the concept we are working on in our research group. Ideology is the science, a term used sometimes in medical science, describing the events or reasons that were before the illness. So some causes that are coming before a person got sick. And sometimes in Greek studies, it also describes the early myths. So in my project, we are researching the early narratives about the beginnings, and I try to apply this concept to the Russian imperial project, which constructs itself as a narrative and not as a geopolitical concept. I tried to focus on the corpus of ideas of the recent texts, like probably late 20-30 years, that were produced from Russian-speaking ideologists like Dugin or Medinsky or Malafeyev. So I read a lot of texts like this and try to analyze how they construct the idea of empire as a time. Where do they set the beginning? What myths do they focus on? And how they understand the imperial project as historical project. So some of them like promote the ideology of Russian Asian greatness, which has begun to take hold throughout Russia, Kazakhstan, Central Asia, and Turkey. And Marlene Laruelle wrote a lot about neo-Eurasianism. And some of them say like that Russia doesn't belong in the European or Asian categories. Some form like Russian world or Russian civilization movement, or focus on the ideas of Russian exceptionalism or a special way, third way. And there's also from Malafeyev or Tsargrad like messianic version of neo-Eurasianism, which focus more on Orthodox Church ideology. When we talk about neo-Eurasianism, people like remember Dugin, but I like to focus that it is not only Dugin, but also a set of ideas, sometimes represented in literature, also by Prilepin, for example. Like this is broader concepts that flow. This is my like thesis that I would love to prove in the PhD project, how to understand Russian imperial project as a time narrative. And also I criticize that most of the researchers who were researching the Russian or Soviet imperial projects, they were focusing on geopolitics. And this is the normal frame that we have when we talk about it. We talk about borders, territories, or some geopolitical ideology that impacted the field, also the political theory very much. The reason of that also the American-based knowledge production, who were really focusing on the geopolitical conceptions, but it also was reproduced by many German studies, and also how the universities were constructed in the concept of aerial studies, how we know like all this Lehrstühle for Slavic studies or these Eastern European studies, that a lot of perspectives were not systematically included. And I also tried to problematize the term post-Soviet, especially if you talk about the history, because this term in an epistemological way works as an imperial blanket. Like I like this metaphor that we cover with this blanket the whole concepts and we cannot see what is inside of it. And I also look into the theories of Global South, for example, how they worked with these terms, and actually they tried to avoid these kind of misconceptions. For example, the people didn't talk about Indian as like post-British India or something like this. They tried to find the perspectives that were covered by this imperial blanket. Here I would like to focus how these imperial narratives became so dominant also in the academia. Just an example that from 1970s till 1980s, in American studies, they were produced around 900 PhD projects, so around 90 books per year in all these areas that we are studying, like Slavic studies, the departments were called that, Slavic studies. And among these corpus of knowledge, only 3% were focusing on non-Russians in the project of the Soviet Union. All the other books were focusing on who is sitting in the Kremlin, who is lying in the mausoleum, so actually on the powerful in this system, and that led to a huge misrepresentation of knowledge and archive that we have actually, and that led to the problem that a lot of narratives are still very problematic, that are very hard to see. And this is just an example that I encountered during my research. This is dear Audre Lorde, black feminist writer who wrote a lot, like the book Sister Outsider, impacted also the black feminist a lot. And this is her citation that the master's tools can never dismantle the master's house. So has a lot of prominent essays. And she has also an essay, Notes from Russia, Notes on the Trip from Russia from 1976. And this essay is sometimes included in her book, Sister Outsider, but sometimes they publish this book without this opening essay. And I tried to problematize this knowledge production, because when she went actually to Soviet Union and to Tashkent. But in her traveling notes, she is describing it as Russia, and the essay is called Notes from the Trips from Russia. And this was the program when the Soviet Union were invited, like writers from friendly socialist countries, or also people from black writers from the USA, to travel through Soviet Union. And in the essay, she is also showing what parts of it were shown to her and what not. And sometimes she is also confused by herself, and I like to use these examples, or for example as Angela Davis, how also these prominent thinkers were somehow confused into the knowledge production system they were invited to write on. But in this essay, when she arrived in Uzbekistan, she could document the moments how this reminded her on her decolonial thinking in her own communities that she was trying to promote. And also, this is the quote from her that she wrote, "I have no reason to believe Russia or USSR is a free society, is a classless society, doesn't even appear to be a strictly egalitarian society." So in the end, she notices this twist into the socialist propaganda that they were invited to visit. And her expectations of international solidarity were shattered in a very short time. And at the same time, she understood that the black Americans were somehow existing alone, and there was no real solidarity, which was the Soviet Union proclaiming to show with these people. This is my second part of this topic, that this is a systemic misrepresentation of knowledge. And also I try to work on the term of hidden colonialism, how in this situation we can find colonial practices that sometimes are not called like this, but they exist in the examples. And I'm also part of Decolonial Language Collective. It's an artistic, theoretical collective, and I tried to mix academic knowledge and non-academic knowledge, and just brought an example of our one intervention. So the Alexanderplatz in Berlin, do you know why it is called Alexanderplatz? This is the question.
Because of the Tsar.
Yes, because of the Russian Tsar Alexander I, who was actually very successful colonizer. During his reign, all the northern Kazakhstan were joined to Russia, and this place was given to this name because he went to visit Berlin during Napoleon War, and the Kaiser actually named this place. And it was not that very important place in Berlin then, just a place around the Berlin Mauer. And one of our first actions was then we went to the place and we were asking who is Alexander. And the answers that people give is all, sometimes Alexander von Humboldt or Alexander the Great, that people think that is just the example how some of the knowledge becomes hidden also in the memory perception, because after that it became also the part of the Eastern Berlin and during GDR, and the fountain which is standing there has actually the name of people Brunnen für Völkerfreundschaft, Fontaine für Friendships of People. So how this Soviet memory just is overlapping with this imperial memory, and this is still like in the center of Berlin, one of the main places, and it is not really thematized among like public discourse. And with these interventions, we try to make this visible. And we were also asking who has the right to give a name, actually. So this is the question on who is participating in this knowledge production, and we tried to rename the place. We invited 16 other feminist names who from the regions or territories or communities who were impacted by the Russian Empire. This is just an example. This is Lucy Tumanyan. She's an Armenian women human rights activists who were also working a lot during the Armenian genocide. And this is also Sofia Rusova. She is a Ukrainian activist. And we sometimes don't know these names because they are not represented in scholar books and also not very present in common knowledge. And this is an example how we try to work with this archive, creating like a different archive, trying to show alternative names in the knowledge production, or sometimes just bringing them into this place. The project was called Open Air Museum of Decoloniality. We were asking what is a museum? Can it be just a place without walls? What is an institution? And we somehow borrowed this practice from Haus HKW, Haus der Kultur und der Welt. This is how they did. They renamed every rooms or halls in the name of some feminist scholar. And now when there are some cultural events or journalists are coming, they are not saying room number 2, 3rd floor, but they say, for example, Miriam Makeba room, like a black feminist. So this brings to the practice that some other perspectives keep repeated or archived, and then we can create an alternative archive. And there are also, of course, problems that decolonial knowledge from the global south cannot somehow fit into this post-Soviet space one-to-one, because all these concepts were developed in different communities very connected to local practices, and now we are in a situation where we can borrow them, but they don't fit exactly to the practices, or they were absorbed by the European knowledge production with the post-colonial theory. And there is, of course, the difference with decolonial positionality or post-colonial positionality, which post-colonial positionality argues that colonial times are already over and people like live in national states in the freedom, but decolonial positionality says we're still in the situation of dependencies and we need to acknowledge them in other forms. This is how we try to problematize the topic of hijacking of decolonial struggles with my colleague Sultanat Shashanova, because also Putin sometimes argues about anti-colonial solidarity, saying that Russia is the leader of the anti-colonial world, and it is sometimes absorbed also in the Western media. And this is a problem where decolonial theory can be also appropriated by national projects or by this imperial propaganda in the way how friendship of people narrative was also used as an international solidarity propaganda instrument during the Soviet Union. So I see there are some parallels how it is used. And also in this text we address one twist into the knowledge production. Maybe you know Walter Mignola, a very famous decolonial scholar, decolonial thinker, and also a long-time collaborator of Marina Solntseva. He worked a lot, for example, on the topic of, on the term of epistemic disobedience, how the communities from colonized situations can organize epistemic disobedience. For example, he criticized when people from Latin America are invited in Europe to talk only on Latin America, and then they become an expert only in the region, somehow regional experts, and then they can have opinion only on their region. But people from Europe can have an opinion about the world, for example. And that's how these imbalances in the systemic knowledge production are produced. And sometimes we see it also in our region, because sometimes people from Georgia, Armenia, or Central Asia, Uzbekistan are invited to talk only about their situation and not having opinion about the world. And that's was Walter Mignola was calling epistemic disobedience. But in the recent times, after the full-scale invasion in Ukraine in 2022, he somehow twisted his opinion and was saying that what Russia is doing in Ukraine is an epistemic disobedience against the West. And he didn't even call the war in Ukraine a war. He wrote this is a special military operation, copy-pasting the language of the Kremlin. And that's how this misconception and also appropriation of decolonial theory works in a very bad way. And I also try to problematize Mignola's later texts, because if we can use his early ideas now, he is arguing into these more nationalistic projects. And also Marina Solntseva criticized him a lot, saying that we need double critique. That we need not only criticize the West as a colonial power, but we need to acknowledge colonial power everywhere where it is. So not only anti-Western position, but anti-colonial position. And this is a moment of self-promotion. I'm a part of the Colonial Language Collective, and we have now the exhibition on show for this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And for the next weekend, it is closing. For Friday and Saturday, we close. We try to invite collectives and artists from Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and also indigenous people from Russia, and try to problematize the topic of institutional misrepresentation. And what do we do if the institutions collapse and don't represent us at all, also in the academic knowledge production, or just usual institutions as museums fail to represent us, or bureaucracy. And this is the program that we have for this weekend, and next weekend if you are in Berlin. This is in Kulturfabrik My Bit. Thank you.